All right. Is everyone excited?
So much excitement.
Yeah, there's, I don't know. We don't seem like this. Okay, we'll see what we can do to change it. But okay, so today's going to be about the buyer packet. We're going to go through and talk about the paperwork that you need when you are working with a buyer and how to fill out the forms and all that fun stuff. So before we get going, though, I think everybody here has signed in. For everyone on Zoom, if you will throw into the chat box your first and last name, and then also if you have not given me your license number, I need that at least one of the times out of the 6 classes, so that I don't have to go look up your license number. And then also for a reminder for you guys on Zoom, so for Bowen and Brooke, in order for me to give you credit, you have to have the camera on so that I can see that you're there paying attention. So if you guys want credit, make sure you turn your camera on. If you don't, then leave your camera off. But all right, so we're gonna, let me get this turned on here. So we're gonna do this similar to just kind of what we did on Tuesday in terms of going through the REPC, meaning we're gonna go through and talk about each of the forms, how to fill them out, what goes on the lines, and then answer any questions and things that you guys have as we run through it all. So okay, get this shared. Should be good here. All right. Lights on or off? Off?
Yeah.
Okay, that's better. All right, so we're just gonna go through and talk about this. So similar to what I told you guys on the REPC the other day, I always want to start off this class by pointing out that notice at the very top, under where it says exclusive buyer broker agreement and agency disclosure, that it says this is a legally binding agreement. Read carefully before signing, designated agency. And so here's the thing is, the thing that's interesting, well, to me, it's interesting, maybe it's to you guys, it's not, but to me is interesting is we did, last week, you guys did the seller packet and went through and talked about the seller paperwork. On the seller paperwork says the same thing. And as a brokerage, if we went out and listed someone's house, and then all of a sudden they took our sign down, went and signed a listing agreement with somebody else, put that agent's sign up in their front yard, and then tried to sell their house, we as a brokerage would be pretty on top of that. And what I mean by that, when I say we would be on top of that, is like, we're probably not gonna let that fly. We're gonna go after them from the standpoint of this is a legally binding agreement. They agreed to let us represent them. Now, on the buyer side, it says the same thing, but for whatever reason, and which, by the way, on the listing agreement, that's going to be the same for every brokerage out there. Every brokerage out there, if they had a listing agreement signed and was trying to sell somebody's house and the person tried to get out of it, every brokerage out there is going to be pretty firm on trying to enforce that contract. The buyer agency agreement, the buyer broker, on the other hand, is not as often enforced by brokerages, just in general. It's something that buyers sign, and then if they get frustrated with their agent or whatever, they just move on and go get another one and go use that agent and then go buy a house. And not always is it going to be enforced. Now, we'll talk more about it in a second here, but go ahead, Dave. I wasn't sure at first if you were raising your hand or if you were just holding your pen there. Yeah.
So on the listing side of things, would you, well, one, hopefully you would just catch it as an agent when they like stop responding or whatever, but is there something on the, if someone goes to post that listing on the MLS, it's already like a
Yeah, it wouldn't
post,
let them.
it would like flag that and.
Well, it won't let it. It won't. Yeah, if it's already on the MLS, based on the tax, the only way you could do it is they'd have to put a different tax ID number.
Which is fraudulent.
Yeah. So if, with that on there, so yeah, that's a good point. So
Like
that's
you
the other side.
couldn't-
It's, yeah, I mean, you couldn't, put it on the MLS without getting it taken off. Yeah, so good point. Thank you. So, but on the buyer side, so there's the two pieces to this though, that I want to make sure you guys understand when I'm saying that this isn't as enforced. So there's two parts to getting paid with when working with a buyer. And what I mean by that is one side of it is that we have them sign this, which they are then agreeing they're going to pay us a commission. But who typically pays the commission when you're representing a buyer? Where does the money come from? Yeah, so it comes from the seller to us. So really, what I'm getting at is there is procuring cause, meaning who is the person who is the reason that a transaction took place, and that's who's going to get paid. But then you've also got this agreement here that is a legally binding agreement that says if they go buy a house, they owe us a commission. So in the event somebody were to sign this agreement with you and then they went and bought a house with somebody else, you wouldn't really go to the seller and say, hey, we're owed that commission because this was signed. Instead, we would have to go to the board and file it for an arbitration to say we were the procuring cause, we should get the commission. But we could go to court though and say they signed this agreement that we'll go through here in a second that says in the event that they buy a house, they're going to pay us a commission, and the amount that they pay us is deducted from what the seller has already paid us. So this is a legally binding agreement, but just know that for whatever reason, typically brokerages don't enforce the legal side of this, meaning to go to court with a buyer and say, we're going to go after you on the commission. Now, with that being said, I do want to say we're happy to go and do that. So for the most part, that's going to be left up to you to, do you want to go after the client to try to enforce this agreement? Now, I'll tell you why it probably doesn't get enforced very often with this next piece. In the event, let's say that Aiden had a buyer, signed this, they went and bought a house with somebody else. Aiden comes to us and says, hey, they bought a house, they signed this agreement, says that I would be owed a commission. I want to go after them and get that commission. Great, we will support you in doing that. But let me make sure you guys understand how it works. And then from there, you can make the decision, do you want to go and enforce it or not? So in the event that somebody said, hey, we want to enforce it. So Aiden says, yep, I want to enforce the buyer broker and try to get paid from this. So we're going to then go get an attorney to go after it, because who really does this contract belong to? Yeah, so it's really this contract is between the brokerage and your buyer, not you necessarily. But even with that being said, here's how it works. So we would go and get an attorney on your behalf, basically, to go after them for the commission. But in your mind, who should pay for that attorney? Buyer. Okay, which we'll get to that, but until we can get it to win in court and then have the buyer pay it, who's going to pay for the attorney?
Definitely.
Yes, like that's what typically, the reason we're having this whole discussion is usually that's what happens, is the agent comes to the brokerage saying, hey, we want to go after the commission, and then the expectation is that we should go after the commission. But now let's say though that
Sam,
Aiden,
right?
what?
This would be like Sam, right?
Yeah.
Like Sam would do this.
Well, I don't know if he would anymore, but the law firm he was with is probably who we would have go and do it, because he created a law firm and then left that firm to come here. So I don't think he's still a practicing attorney per se. So, but yes, we'd work through Sam for sure.
All right,
So, but here's the thing. So let's just say that it was a $10,000 commission that we collected. That we take them to court, we collect $10,000 in commission. Aiden's on an 80-20 split. Well, let's say an 86-14, but after the 6% franchise fee, he's going to get $8,000 of that. So does it seem fair that Everest goes and pays for an attorney and then you get $8,000 and Everest gets $2,000?
No, it kind of seems fair a little bit. I don't know.
Well, okay.
Closing a lot of deals.
So here's how it's going to work. So let me just explain how it works. There's good news and bad news of being on a high split. When you get paid a commission, you get the majority of the commission. But if you said, I want to go after this person to try to collect this $10,000 commission, you get to pay whatever your split is of the share of the attorney's fees. So if we're going to go after them, and we're happy to do it, but so if Aiden came to us and said, hey, I want to go after this buyer to try to collect the commission, great, we're going to do that. We'll go hire the attorney, but you get to pay 80% of those attorney's fees up front. And I hope that makes sense to you guys why that would be, because when we collect the $10,000, you're getting 80% of it. We're only getting 20%. So now in the event you're on a 50-50 split, then yeah, we'll pay half, you pay half, because when the money comes in, we get half, you get half. So can you see now when I said most brokerages don't enforce this? Can you see now why they don't? Because most brokerages are going to treat it that way. They're going to say, yep, let's do it. But you get to pay whatever your split is of that. So if you were at 100% company, you get to pay all the attorney's fees. So what happens though, if you go pay the attorney's fees, goes to court and then ends up, you lose, we don't get it, then you're out the money. So I think that's the reason that most of the time this doesn't get enforced, is because we're happy to do it as the brokerage. We're happy to do that. But whatever your split you're on is the percentage you get to pay of the attorney's fees up front, or, you know, until we win the case. Does that make sense? So anyway, hopefully that all makes sense to you. And I think that's why most of the time brokerages don't enforce this to say we're going after it, which, you know, like I say, to some extent, and I think Aiden probably brought it up, the reason it doesn't happen so much on a listing site is because, yeah, once it's on the MLS, good luck to another company getting it on to the MLS. They could throw a sign out or whatever, but all right. So legally binding agreement can be enforced, even though you're not going to see it enforced very often in a transaction. But like I said, we will, and there are times when, yeah, we're going to say, yeah, we should go after it because maybe it is a huge commission or whatever. So anyway, but that's how it works. All right, next. So the agreement is between Century 21 and the buyer. So we already talked about this Tuesday, but just to make sure you remember, what should we put in there as the name for the buyer?
The name that they will be. Yes, for the loan.
Good. Whatever name they're going to apply for the loan in is the name we want to put on. So if it's a husband and a wife, but only he's going to be on the loan, whose name goes up here? Husband and wife? Yeah, just him. Okay, so just understand that's how it works. Now, in the event though, you have a scenario like that, that's a husband and wife, and they say, well, it's going to only be in his name, but I want her to be on title. You'll put all of these documents in just his name. At closing afterwards, they can do and then do a quick claim deed to put her on to title. So just know that that's how it's going to work, is only the names that should go in this agreement is anybody that's going to be on the loan. And the way that you put the name in there should match how they're applying for the loan. Now, truth is, on this agreement isn't as important as the REPC, but since most of what we are doing is either through .loop or DocuSign, just have it all be consistent. It's kind of how I always say.
If they were gonna pay cash, we just go based on the name that's on their like ID or something.
So great question. If they're paying cash, they can do it however they want.
Oh.
Yeah, now typically the title company is probably going to want it to be in, you know, a name that makes sense, but yeah, really you could kind of put it as whatever you want to. That way.
Another question on that too. Is,
Yeah.
so I have a buyer, or I mean, maybe it'll be a buyer, and I guess even like on the sell side too, it's like this line right there, the buyer. He has an LLC, so I put the LLC in there, but then when he's signing like his name, it would be his actual name, right?
Correct.
And the same with the initials, and the initials of his name, not the LLC.
Yep, correct. So in fact, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. So both on the seller side or the buyer side, If the property was going into a corporation or it's in a trust or something like that, then yes, they're gonna sign their own name. But we are gonna want a copy of either the articles of incorporation or the trust showing who has the right to sign on behalf of that organization.
And then with that name on the bottom of the page, right?
What do you mean on the bottom of the page?
So just like right here, it says like the buyer would be, you know, whatever, Bob LLC, right? But then in the bottom, it say Bob Bobson, right?
Yeah, he would just sign his name. Yeah, or write his name. Yep, you got it. All right, so the terms of the agreement, buyer retains the company, including blank, the buyer's agent, which is obviously you, so you're gonna put your name in there. And that is, the agreement is going to end at 5 PM on blank day, month and year. How far out should we put this here? What,
1 year,
how long?
1 year.
1 year? Okay.
However long you can get away with.
However long you can get away with, okay?
We got a lifetime buyer broker with some of our clients.
Can you do that? Oh, I'm gonna say, bro, well,
It's crazy.
Any other thoughts?
6 months.
6 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
Year.
So here's the thing, there is not a right answer on that. And so it's kind of whatever. I will tell you how I do it. Doesn't mean that's how you need to do it, but here's how I think of it is however long you're going to agree to this. Remember, we have fiduciary duties that we owe to our client, right? And one of those fiduciary duties is obedience, which means if they say, I want to go see a house, what do you have to do? Gotta go show them a house. So for me, it is kind of a double-edged sword when James is saying put it for a year. You get a buyer that isn't gonna buy, that's just gonna keep looking at houses. Guess what you get to keep doing for a year? Yeah, you get to keep showing houses to them. So for me, here's how I do it. And again, I'm not saying this is how you guys should do it. If you want to just put a year, put a year. That's totally fine. For me, here's how I look at it is before I have them sign this agreement, I typically am going to ask a few extra pre-qualifying questions. I want to find out, what is your time frame looking like? When are you wanting to get into a property? When are you wanting to move in? Once I know that, then is when I usually will put in the date here. And I usually will just put in a date, maybe a month after whenever they said, just in case that's, you know, something were to go wrong. But that's for me how I typically do it. Most of the time with a buyer, and again, there's going to be exceptions to everything, but generally, as a general rule, when I'm working with a buyer, I will find out when they want to move in, and then I will put in, you know, so let's say they said they wanted to move next month. I'm going to probably put in April as when this agreement is good.
So a big reason I do a year is because a lot of times I've had situations where clients would say, you know, whatever their timeline is, but I've had really good success with new builds, new constructions. And they've been 9 to 11 months out. But recently, I think I learned through this class is that if you go under contract during this, but it expires, that still supersedes the timeline. So I guess I would always, there's been like 3 different times where I would just go get a new buyer broker because it was extended because the builder's gonna close on time, this or that. So I guess that 6 months or whatever their timeline is doesn't matter as long as they're under contract before this expires.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so did you guys on Zoom hear all that? Or do I need to repeat? Is anybody on Zoom?
I think you basically got it. I think we're good.
Oh, maybe I have to turn it super. I gotta turn it louder, that's the problem. Say it again.
I think we're good.
Okay, cool, thank you.
I have a question on that.
So if you guys need me on Zoom, I'll try to remember to repeat, but if I don't, and I do it depending on where the person's sitting, like Aiden's about to talk and he's up front and I just assume you can hear him. So if you guys ever can't and want me to repeat what they said, ask.
So talking about that, in section 10, there's attachments, and if you just say there are no attachments, but then you just go, well, I don't even know if you do this. You write an addendum to the buyer broker just saying, the term is now whatever 6 months, like more. Would that be like an addendum saying there is an addendum? Like you write an addendum,
No.
say section 10, there is an addendum,
No.
and no, if you just go, the new term is whatever.
Yeah, as long as so great point. Are you okay if we wait till we get there? So but if I don't say it when we get there, then remind me. But yeah, I would, no, you don't need to do that. So, okay. So as far as the date we're gonna put in there, that's typically how I like to do it, is find out, because yeah, what James is saying is right, is we're gonna see in here in a little bit, there's a section that says, once the property goes under contract, if it were to close after whatever our expiration date is here, this automatically extends to the closing date.
And when are they gonna fix it and put a section 15? Based on what it says.
Section 15?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
starting on the effective date as defined in section 15 below. There's only. All right,
Good question.
I brought this up for a year.
You what?
I brought this up for a year.
Really?
To Sam
I was gonna say, if you told me,
and you.
no, I don't think you told me.
Yes, I have.
Really?
Yeah, that could be pretty serious, actually.
Like, I don't know the legality behind all of it. I have had people ask about it.
That actually is good, because you go to section 15 and there's nothing there.
You can write your own.
Yeah.
All right, hang on one second. I gotta mute some of the background noise. Okay. Where's it at? I didn't see that.
Section 1, right in section 1, put on your reading glasses.
I know, I do think that. I can't see it.
Second line
It
down.
says the buyer hereby retains the company, including.
Oh, gotcha, I see.
Buyer's agent. Right under that, as the authorized agent for the company.
Okay, perfect.
Starting on the effective date.
So when you told Sam and Rob, what'd they say?
Sam goes, oh, we'll have to look at that. And that was 6 months ago. So apparently not.
All right.
It just seemed like an easy out from someone that doesn't even have a water.
Yeah. A full timer. Okay. Perfect. So yeah, I'll bring that up because I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't know what used to be section 15, but clearly we need to, or maybe it has been updated and I just haven't printed it.
We'll check on
An updated one. Yeah, checked out. All right. Next then it goes in and says till that date or the closing or the acquisition of the property, whichever occurs first, right? Occurs first, yes. So, and then it goes on to say this agreement is good for either A, in blank county, or B, located at. So here's how you want to think about this is the idea of this is saying this agreement's only good for this county or a certain property. So here's the thing. At Everest, we teach you guys, you should go and get this signed as soon as you meet a buyer. Get it signed as soon as possible, working with a buyer. That is not what is taught throughout other brokerages in the state, meaning, well, let me rephrase that. They probably do say that, but most brokerages, most agents, let me say it that way. I would be willing to say that over 98% of the agents do not get this signed until they're writing an offer. So kind of keep in mind, most don't get it signed. And the reason is, and in fact, I don't think we have anybody from California on today, but when I go train down in our California offices and I talk to them about this, even our offices down there, the agents are scared to death of this. So just know most agents across the country are afraid of this agreement. They're afraid to ask a buyer to sign it. But you don't need to be. Like if you're afraid, it's because of you, it's not them. So don't be afraid to do it is part of what I'm saying. But we train to go get it signed. And so for me, especially the reason I say that is when you look at how this is worded, if I was going to go out and show Trevor a property, so let's say he's not an agent and I was going to go show him a property, why would he not sign this? Let's say that he was hesitant to sign it for, all of Salt Lake County. But he wanted to go see this property and he's hesitant to do it because he doesn't know me. He's never met me before. If I said to him, great, well, I at least need you to sign this, that if you buy this property, we're going to go look at, which was what this B would be located at. If you're going to buy that property, that if I'm going to go show it to you and you decide you want to buy it, you're going to use me to buy it. Why would he be hesitant to sign this? I mean, assuming he was.
Sleaze bag.
I
Okay.
don't want to buy the house or I want to save
money or something, you know what I mean? Because he's planning on some kind of unit deal.
Yeah, that's the point, is see, why I say it is so crucial to get this signed before you go out and show properties to people, is because I can see that they may say, well, you just barely called me on the phone, I've never even met you before. Like, if they said that, I can buy that. I can't buy the fact of then saying, well, I at least need you to sign an agreement saying that if I go show you this property and you buy it, that you're gonna use me to buy it. If they're hesitant to that, there's a reason. And it's probably because they're not planning on using you. So to me, it's imperative you get a buyer broker signed, because then you know where you stand with the people. See, I sit on the professional standards committee over at the board, and I have seen so many times where people will file a complaint or try to do an arbitration saying they're owed a commission. And people will say, well, I went out and showed them all these properties and I asked them to sign this and they wouldn't sign it. And I'm always like, and you were surprised then that they didn't use you? Like, you shouldn't be surprised. If they're not willing to sign it and they go use somebody else, you should not be surprised. But so just know you can do it either based on the county, or you can do it for specific properties. So if you're gonna go show properties, get them to sign this. At least you know that you're not wasting your time to go out and show them those 2 or 3 properties or whatever. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't want to drop any names, but I seen a specific buyer broker that they adjusted it instead of one specific county. Just that one section was adjusted and highlighted to say all Utah counties. Is there, because I mean, I have worked with clients who are looking in between Weber County and Davis County, right? Like,
Yep.
how does that play in? Because I think that does make it a little bit easier if it does say.
So in fact, I'm gonna bring that up too. I'll bring up the section 15, but because I've had that same thought of like, why don't we have this say county and then in parentheses turn it into counties?
Right, yeah.
So that you could say in there Utah or Salt Lake or whatever.
I literally just put any.
Do you really?
Just
I did not know
any
that.
county and any location.
I've seen people do that to any
Yeah.
county, Utah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
I've seen
that's
people do
okay.
it.
But I think it would totally, that's, I think the answer with this is you just put any.
That would make sense.
But to me, it would make sense to have it because maybe I don't want to go to
I have.
St. George?
Juab County or whatever.
I have a buyer that wants to do buy investment properties, and they had an agent that they would use in Utah County, but she wouldn't go up to Weaver County.
Yeah.
And so I had to sign my only
In Weaver County, yeah. So that's just it, is I think there are scenarios that you are gonna do, that you're gonna say, I don't wanna go to Juab County or Iron County or whatever to do it. So it may make sense, but but to me, it would also make sense to have it the other way where you could, that way you could say Utah County, Salt Lake County, so whatever. So anyway, we'll bring that up, but yeah, that's a good point. So just in the event, my recommendation would be to put in use until, or if we get it changed, just put any, because then that way you're covered. But we did have an agent here that had come across somebody off of it was an internet lead, that the person was unhappy with the agent they had been using. And when the agent was talking to the buyer, they said, well, I have signed this agreement, but only for Salt Lake County. Well, they hated this agent so bad that they told our agent, we'll go buy in Utah County just to get out of doing this.
Savage.
Well, as you can imagine though, so then what happened is the agent went and signed one of these for Utah County. But as you can imagine, they didn't really want to live in Utah County. So after he showed them a few properties, all of a sudden they were saying, well, we really do want to be in Salt Lake. Is there a way we can, like, you can still help us? So the agent had then just called up the other agent with the other brokerage and said, hey, I've been showing these guys houses in Utah County. I know you've got an agreement for Salt Lake County. Is there something we can work out to where I can take over in Salt Lake County? And if I remember right, I don't remember she asked for a small referral fee or she just said, go ahead, I don't really care. So anyway, just that's kind of try to get it to where you're doing any county, but if not, if they're hesitant to it, if you're going to go show properties, and for me personally, I'm not opposed to going and showing, if somebody's hesitant to sign it off the bat, I'll go show a few properties, but they've at least got to agree to sign it for the properties I'm showing. Because if they're not going to do that, then there's a reason, and why waste your time? So, all right. And I was expecting Douglas to say, when every time I say, here's how I do it, I keep expecting Douglas to go, no, you don't. You just call me and I do it.
Sometimes.
Which is a lot of times. what
Only on the good times.
happens. Yeah. On the ones that are slam dunk, I still do it. But if it involves showing a property, well, more than one, then I let you do
That's not true.
it.
If they've already seen the property, if they fleeced another agent without signing the property, then my dad will write up the offer.
No, I went with Dave. All right, so brokerage fee. This section here, so what this section here is saying is that they are going to owe us, and then, in fact, I just am realizing this one I have on the screen is not the updated one. But the one I gave you is more updated than this one, so anyway. There's got a spot in there that you can put in the amount. So in this one on the screen, it shows 3% plus $4.95. Actually, it's just a blank line now, so you can put in the percentage plus whatever the additional fee is that you're going to charge, okay? So what this says, though, is that in the event they buy a property, they will owe us whatever amount you put on the line. On the case of what you're seeing on the screen, it says 3% plus a $4.95. So that's what they would owe us. Then it gets deducted, though, as we talked about, from whatever the seller is paying. So in the event that you came across a property, because do you guys ever see properties that are less than 3% on the MLS?
Never.
Yeah, I wish it was never.
I know, right?
It used to be never, or very rare anyway. But so here's what you want to do is you want to start, when you get to this section, what you want to do with your buyers, have a discussion with them explaining that they're going to owe 3%, but we're going to deduct whatever the seller is going to pay. So for years and years, the way I would do it is I always told them this says 3%, but essentially every property on the MLS offered 3%. And so I would just tell buyers, you're not going to have to pay me anything except for the additional fee that was on there. And even then, and again, different market than what we're in now, I would say we're going to ask the seller to pay that for you. So you're not going to pay me anything. But in our current environment where you're seeing 2 or 2.5 and 1 or $1, you need to start having discussions with your buyers of saying, okay, in the event we come across a property that is offering less than 3%, how do you want me to handle it? You want to have that discussion with them and letting them know. You can even tell them, I'm going to do all that I can to get the seller to pay that. But you need their permission basically to do that. That way, if you've had that discussion with them, then you can call up the listing agent and say, I've got a buyer, but they are going to owe a 3% commission. You're only owing 2, or only offering 2. Now, like I said, to some extent, if they've got 15 offers or 20 offers, this probably isn't going to work. In which case, you're going to have to just make the decision either to change this on an addendum to be less than the 3%, or ask your client to pay you the difference. So, and there are some ways you can go about trying to accomplish that. But just here's the biggest thing I would say is just keep in mind, even over the last couple of years, I helped my sister buy a condo. We were in a multiple offer scenario, but I still got them to pay the full 3%. Even though they were offering, I don't remember if it was 2 or 2.5, but I still got them to pay that even though we were in a multiple offer scenario. Now, part of it was the other person had a home to sell. My sister didn't have a house to sell. So it made it easy for them to say they would rather go with ours. And it also helped that I guess the other offer asked for more in the seller to pay the buyer's portion of this as well. So anyway, just know you can still get a 3%. Don't just automatically assume you have to settle for 2 or whatever. Does that make sense? Yeah, true.
What if you agree on 2 on this, the buyer broker agreement, but then on the MLS it says 3, so there's the extra percentage from them. Do you get that extra?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you did, which I am not a proponent of doing that, you could put 2% on here. And then if they're offering 3, then you get that. So yeah, the way that this is worded, and I'll have to see if I can find exactly where it's at.
No less. Brokerage fee shown above provided that the BAC is not less than the amount.
Yeah. So as long as, yeah, right here.
Over.
Not, I just saw it when I turned my head. and
Right
lost
under
it.
BAC.
right? You have that-
Yeah, not less than the amount shown above, so. Yep, so as long, if it's more, all the better. So, all right. Any questions on this section?
I guess just kind of a personal question for you, like, do you send that, the change, like, I guess, how do you have the conversation with that agent in terms of, or do you not have the conversation with them at all if you're trying to negotiate a higher BAC for you? You just send over that, document, just like put a part of your offer, say, hey, here's our offer.
So,
Well,
okay,
no, just
so,
leave that part out of the conversation.
Okay, so-
And hope it's good enough.
Yeah, that's what you don't say, you just send it.
Yeah.
so let me clarify real quick though. You can't make it part of the offer. It is
Oh,
an,
yeah.
it's
They
an
don't sign
ethics
that.
violation to discuss the commission between on a real estate purchase contract. So,
But didn't you send it together all, like, but not with the contract? but
so
it's with the
yeah, so
contract.
here's the challenge. The hard part of answering that question is, the answer to that is kind of, it depends. Like, it depends, like, if there are no competing offers, then yeah, I'm typically gonna call and say, like, I've had a number of times where I've just called and said, my client loves the house. They would be interested in buying it. Problem is, they've signed a buyer broker with me for 3%. You're only offering 2%. They're gonna have to pay me the extra 1%, and they don't have the money. So they would love to buy the house, but they can't.
I just feel like that conversation 10 times out of 10 will not go your favor in this market.
Yeah, in this market, it's gonna be a little more difficult to go about
Unless
it.
your offer justifies it, of course,
But so that's just it, is to some extent, like, just keep in mind, I think the biggest thing that I want you to learn from it is, yes, call and talk to before you do any offer ever, always call and talk to the listing agent. Because look at how many agents just send it comes in an email.
that's
You don't
pretty
even get a phone
annoying as a
call.
listing agent.
What?
That's pretty annoying. as
Oh,
a
it's
listing agent.
way in the, well, it depends. If the offer is crappy, then I don't care, but. Douglas?
So how we do it is you fill out the escrow instructions.
Yeah.
And then you make it one combined PDF and you send it over. And then your conversation with the listing agent is, hey, a part of our offer is this escrow instructions. So when if your client isn't completely satisfied and they decide to counter, you're not countering on the instructions, you're countering on price.
Yeah,
I see. Okay.
and if they do counter on the instructions, they now have violated our code of ethics. You cannot bring commissions into. Now, with that being said, though, there is this fine line, because the buyer can ask the seller to pay part of this. That is okay. The buyer can ask the seller to pay part of their brokerage fees that the buyer owes. It's this fine line of, like, they can't counter and say, we're not gonna do your escrow.
To be 2%.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can't put BAC to be, because that's not part of, this commission is between the brokerages and the seller. The buyer's no part of that. Go
That
ahead.
brings up just like a huge point, 'cause that's an adjustable number, so I can say, oh yeah, sure, I'll take 2%, but a $2,000 acquisition, whatever, plus $2,000, and that's directly going to you, whatever the $295 goes to the brokerage. Is that how you're justifying it? Because, like, I'm still pocketing like a ton of money from that.
No,
So
you
that's a
cannot charge more than a 1095, speaking from experience.
1095 is the highest you go. Okay.
Yeah.
What's- is-
We actually
This is
did.
Still two separate things.
Yeah, we actually did have an agent charge 4,000, which is why we put a cap on it, because we had an agent charge $4,000 in addition to the commission. In addition to a 7% commission, by the way. It was a 7% commission plus $4,000.
Yeah, and that's what
Know
I'm
your
saying,
worth.
is it's like.
And you guys can't even get a confidence.
I know, exactly.
Because the thing is, you know, that's like you're saying, you can't discuss commission very specifically, but you're like, oh, well, it's, you know, it's not commission, it's a transaction.
Well, okay, so hold on, actually, let me clarify that.
Yeah,
So-
but I think we're talking about two separate things.
Well, I'm not sure we are, but because here's the thing. Technically, this 495 is additional commission, is really, so let me give you the kind of the history of this, and maybe that'll help in understanding. I got my license in 1996. When I got my license, not long after that, the company that I was with, so in 3 years later, I guess, in 99, the company I was with started charging $195, and what we called it was what was it called? compliance fee. It was a compliance fee. So there was a $195 compliance fee. Well, what the reason they did that, and so let me even just explain why we even have that at all, is about that time. See, when I first started, a brand new agent, you started on a 50-50 split. Nobody ever got anything higher than that. And the only way that the highest you ever got in terms of a commission, because there were no caps. So the highest you ever got was 80%. So you could get, started at 50, the highest you could ever get to was 80%, no caps. Like that was the best you could ever do. And you had to earn it. Like it wasn't, I remember I was this close to earning an 80%, and I went into my broker and I was like, my next transaction is going to get me to 80%. Will you just put me on 80 before it closes? And she was like, no, that's not the way we do it. Like, it just wasn't really even heard of. But around that same time, there started to be pressure on commissions, meaning the way that companies started recruiting other people was they started going, I'll give you an 85. I'll give you an 85% commission, and then turned into 90 and then 95. And so because of that, the companies had to figure out, how do we make some additional money on this? Because we're losing it to the agents. So what happened was companies started noticing, because top agents were doing this additional fee and calling it a transaction fee, or so, I don't remember what they were calling it. So, but other individual agents were charging, a 7% commission plus $500 or whatever. Well, so the brokerages saw that and said, well, maybe we should just require that on every transaction. And so that's what happened. It started in around 1999. Companies started charging this $195 additional fee, and we call it a compliance fee. And the way that the company sold it to us was, I would go out, and when I was on a listing, I would tell them, so the commission's going to be 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever percentage I was charging. And then I would say, plus another $195, because we're going to have a paralegal, because that was the way the company sold it to us, was a paralegal was going to review every one of the contracts. So I would go and sell it that way. Well, what happened though then is HUD got involved and came out and said, you guys got to quit this. You got to call it what it really is. But this wasn't for, so we implemented, the company I was with, 1999 is when it first happened. HUD didn't have a problem and get involved until it was probably like 2005 or 6 or, somewhere around that time frame. But they came and said, you got to call it what it really is. You got to call it additional commission. And so for a long time, it had to be additional commission. Then Prudential, which is now Berkshire Hathaway, had a lawsuit and they won it, and they were able to call it an admin fee. So then we called it an admin fee, but it's kind of come around again of like, it's not an admin fee. It's, call it what it is. It's additional commission. So you'll notice that, well, we do still say admin fee, does it still on here even?
Yeah. Well, some of that money.
No,
does
on
go-
this new one. So what I've got on the screen, I need to update, because when you look at the paper that I sent you guys, it shows the brokerage fee.
Wow.
So just know, like, it really is just additional commission. And the other thing Aiden said that I want to make sure to clarify is, if you charge $1,000, the first $295 of that, just belongs to the company. The additional $705 doesn't all go to you. You're still on your split. So just keep that in mind, because sometimes there are brokers within even our own company that will say, whatever you charge above that is yours to keep. Or I hear them say, I always charge $695 because then it's $295 to the company, and the other fee pays for the TC. But whatever you charge in addition to a $295 is yours based on whatever your split is. So like, if a brand new agent that's on a 50-50 split charged, let's say $500, the $295 comes off, and then the additional $200, they're only getting $100 of it. So just know it's whatever your split is what you get of that. So does that answer what you were saying? That was a long answer, but
That hurts. Like, whack, that sucks.
what?
That sucks.
Why?
It's like, oh, because I don't even know how my team does it too. I don't know if they do that or not, but it's saying like, oh, look, can you charge over, because they do $295 for Central One, $295 for RTC, and they're like, yeah, anything above that is just yours.
It's
So
yours to keep.
maybe
But that's not really
neglect
true.
That part out of like, oh, that's 30%.
It's
You know,
yours
whispered
to
on the way
keep
out.
based on whatever your split is. Yeah.
I think it would be hard to sell that if you were just calling that additional commission, especially like.
Oh, yeah.
3% plus just extra $9.95 for what? Just additional commission? It sounds.
Well, that's why HUD got involved and said, you gotta call it what it is. It's just additional commission. So don't try to mask it.
costs.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So here's the thing. If we wanted to get rid of it, all we have to do is say nobody ever gets, there's no more caps and nobody gets higher than an 80% commission. And I promise you, George would say, we will not enforce that. We'll just drop it all together.
Mhm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Really? You would be?
No.
I was gonna say, if you're in favor, I can go get it approved, I'm sure, for you, even if not for anybody else. All right. Yeah, yeah. But it's funny because this has become less and less of an issue though. Like honestly, I used to, when I would teach in this class, we would spend half of the class going through that because agents were like, that's just not fair or whatever, that like, I don't want to charge that to my clients. And I get it. When we first implemented it, it was a struggle to me until I finally one day just realized that it is just an additional cost to the client, meaning like the client's not aware that they're going to pay for title insurance, the lender's fee and title insurance, that they have to pay the title company, like it's just another fee in essence.
But if you are working with a VA buyer, you cannot
Good point.
charge that.
Yeah, good point.
And Century 21 won't charge you that either. You just have to know it.
Yeah, thank you. Good point. So there are a few scenarios such as VA that if you have a VA buyer,
You can't.
VA will not allow them to pay that. And as a result of that, the company's not going to penalize you, of course. Yeah.
Basically, you can't have additional agent fees on VA or anything.
Yeah, correct.
My fiance works at a VA like lender, so he actually had a question about that literally yesterday. He's like, do other agents just know that you can't charge that to VA? I'm like,
Most don't.
most don't. I was like, this is the first time I've had a conversation about it, so that's funny, 'cause he literally asked me yesterday. He's like, unofficial question.
That's awesome. So yeah, but yeah, on VA, we don't. Yep. And the company won't penalize you for that because it's not your problem. So the other times that, and we haven't seen that too much lately, but is like if there's a relocation company involved and the relocation company won't pay it, they're the same concept. So,
Because they'll just enforce this.
yeah, exactly. All right. So we good on the brokerage fee and how that all works.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. All right, section 3, protection period. If within blank months, what should we put there?
6 is what I do.
6, okay.
6 is usually what-
Many as you can get away with,
I hear 3 though. I hear it almost hurts you getting more than like 6.
okay.
But I don't know.
So what were you saying?
I was just saying 6 is
6? Okay, yeah, whatever you want to put in there, put something in there. Now, here's the thing though, that I will tell you, the only advice I will give you on this one, don't put 0. Just don't put 0 is my advice. Do something, a number more than 0 is what I would say. So for me personally, I usually just did 1 month. And because to me, for me, I'm like, I'm not gonna chase, if this expires. So remember, for me, I typically have signed it for 3 or 4 months, whatever it is with the buyer. If it expires and they're not willing to renew, or I don't want to renew, I'm also not going to chase them around for 6 months to see, did they ever go buy a house? So for me, I typically do 1. Do whatever you guys said. If you want to put 12, 6, whatever, that's great. Do whatever you want to do on that. The reason I say don't do 0 though, is we recently had an agent in the company that did that put 0 in there. And then the person, the day after this expired, went and bought one of the houses that our agent had shown them. And our agent was saying, I want to be paid the commission on that because I showed them the property. And initially we were like, all right, well, you probably will be able to. And then we looked and they had put in protection period 0.
1 day. Wow.
So it was kind of like at that point, we're like, you cut yourself off from an opportunity to that because the agreement expired. So
Unfortunately, that's a hard life lesson.
it is, yeah.
But it says buyer's agent negotiates on buyer's behalf. Does that include like just the bare minimum, just showing it is considered negotiating on their behalf?
2 and 3.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes, that even just going and showing them the property to some extent does.
Negotiate the show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
procuring cause, is that what that? Like the procuring cause.
Is this procuring cause? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you were to be the one to show them and then cancel them, it still kind of
Okay.
justifies you.
So, yeah, so showing the property as part of procuring cause, but that's not all of procuring cause. So same, which by the way, same thing with getting a buyer broker signed is part of procuring cause, but it's not all. So just think of procuring cause is like what, the best way I can explain it is how the Arkansas Supreme Court explains it. And that is, it's the squirrel that shook the branch that caused the nut to fall, not the one that gathered. So if you think of it that way is how you think best of procuring cause. So just because you showed somebody a house may not be procuring cause, but it's a piece of it for sure. And same with signing the buyer broker.
So do like 2 and through, they look at that.
Showing them the property is part of it. But yeah, we don't have it so much, but for years and years, people would say, I'm the one who showed it. That's procuring cause. I showed it, but it's not, that's part of it, but that's not. No, because part of with procuring causes, you might have shown them the property and then you never called them back for 3 months. You know, you never had any interaction with them. They're saying, well, I was abandoned, so I went and found another agent. All right. I'm going to skip through section 4. If you have questions, let me know. Section 5 is the duties that we owe to them. When we get to this, I just always explain for me, I always explain to the buyer, what this says is that I'm on your side. I'm negotiating on your behalf. I'm looking out for your best interest. You know, we're not adversaries. We're on the same team. Okay? Then you're going to have them initial, dated. 5.2 just explains limited agency. So if you have no listings, you probably don't really even need to spend much time talking about limited agency, other than you do have to tell them in the event that they wanted to buy a home that was listed by Century 21 Everest, Everest will be limited, you wouldn't be. So this is just explaining how limited agency works. Professional advice. All right, when I get to this section, I always say to the buyer, basically what this says is don't trust anything I tell you. And usually they like give me a funny look of like, what? And I just explain to them then what this says is I'm trained in the marketing of real estate. I'm not a property inspector. I'm not a CPA. I'm not an attorney. Like, so if you have those type of questions, I'm not the person to ask. And then what I will do is we'll get to the due diligence form. But when we get to this section, and after I say to them, what this says is don't trust anything I tell you, I go pull out the due diligence form to show them, here's the different areas you can talk to experts in. That's just not me. Then when I go out and show them a property and they say to me, oh, well, where's the property line? I always say, remember when I said, don't trust anything I tell you? And they always go, oh yeah, that's right. And I say, you know, this is where it looks like it, but don't rely on me because I'm not the expert. So that's professional advice. Dispute resolution says that any dispute that arises out of this contract, that we will go to mediation first before going to court. Section 8 says in the event we end up in court, the prevailing party is entitled to the attorney's fees. So that's where Aiden was saying earlier of if we go to court and I said, who should pay for it? And he said, the buyer. Then if you win, then section 8 would allow for that. Okay. Section 9 is buyer authorizations. And what this is giving us is the buyer is now giving us permission to disclose after the closing to each of the MLSs that we participate in the final sales price. Why do we need that permission? Yeah, we need it for comparables, but why do we need permission?
Because we're in a disclosure.
Non-disclosure.
Whatever.
We're a non-disclosure state, and so we can't disclose the sales price without permission. So that's where we're getting permission. And the reason we want it, though, is what Aiden said, is we want, could you imagine trying to sell properties if you knew nothing about what others sold for? All right, and then section B is that we can communicate with them for the purposes of soliciting real estate. That's to get us around the do not call list. Okay. All right, section 10, attachment. So this is where Aiden was talking about. So most of the time when you're doing this, you're going to check the box for that there are not additional terms. But in the event later on that you did need to do it. So let me give you the example that where that would come into play is, let's say we put in there the 3% plus, $495. We go find a property that's only offering 2%, and it's such a competitive scenario that for whatever reason you decide I'm just going to take the 2%. Well, then we need to do an addendum changing this to saying that the buyer owes us 2% rather than leaving it at 3%. And the reason for that is if Century 21 ever came back to audit us and saw that we had signed a buyer broker that said we were going to collect 3% and we only got 2%, we have to pay them 6% off every transaction. Doesn't matter who you are in the company, every person pays Century 21 a 6% franchise fee. Well, if we said we were going to collect 3% on here, but only actually got 2%, Century 21 wants to be paid based on what this agreement says. So if they came back and found that, then technically they would be coming to you saying, you owe us an additional 6% of the 1% that you didn't collect. If that makes sense. So in order to keep that clean, we should do an addendum to this, changing it to 2%. So that's where then so on .loop, there is an addendum to the buyer broker. And so based on what you were saying though, we would not need to create an addendum that says there are addendums and then do the changes. We just, by creating one and putting it into the transactions is now good enough. So no different than on the Repsy. If you said there were no addendums and then somebody does a counter offer or whatever, it just brings it in. But it does kind of make sense of what you're saying. Like to me, I worked at a bank before I came into real estate. And like we were huge on paper trail. And so what you're saying is right on. Is if you said are not, I would quit worrying about is there really an
You
addendum?
wouldn't even check it all. It's like, oh, there's not.
Yeah, versus if you said there are, you'd be like, okay, where is it? So,
Second part about going through like real estate school, it's like make sure everything's accounted for. And then I
Yeah.
talked to agents who've been there for like 10 years. No, yeah, you can just totally strike that out and then just get an addendum later. I'm like, what?
which is technically true. It just
Yeah.
still happens. But all right, section 11 then is equal housing opportunity, which just basically what that's saying is we're going to follow all the fair housing laws. That we're not going to discriminate on anything that way. Okay. Section 12 is electronic transmissions and counterparts. We're agreeing that it's going to be okay to send things electronically back and forth between each other, and that that's good enough. And the due on sale clause. So on this section, I typically only bring this up to my buyer if they're looking at and wanting to do, if they were wanting to do a seller finance or a lease option, then I'm going to have a discussion about due on sale. But if they're just purchasing a house, due on sale really doesn't matter. Because so you guys tell me, what is a due on sale clause?
This is for like if you were selling a house, you wanted to actually know, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, that was kind of my first.
The
Yeah.
seller can demand the funds if they're somehow like incorporated.
Who
Those
can?
funds, the seller.
Not the sale. Well, so the mortgage company, in the event they were to default on their note and trustee for whatever, like it was a meth house and the bank finds out, the bank can then call that note due and payable. So that's the due on sale. So the reason I say I only have a discussion around it is if we are doing a seller finance or a lease option, if they're just buying the house, that loan's going to be paid off that the seller has. But on a seller finance, they might wrap, it's called a wrap, is they may wrap this around the current loan that's in place. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to be interested to see what happens. Well, when the screen was up, it has the interest rates put up there. Like, what are some of the lowest interest rates you know that people have gotten?
2.8.
Okay, so
I have a
2.3.
2.6. Okay, what are they today?
Four.
4. So let's assume down the road they get to 5 or 6. I think it's very possible that we see people wanting to go take over basically the current seller's loan, which you can't necessarily do that anymore. Like it used to be, you could just assume the loan. You have to do a qualified assumption now, which the banks are not going to want to. If it's a 2 point something interest rate and interest rates are at 5, the bank's not going to be like, yeah, we'll let you assume just take over their loan. So down the road, I will not be surprised if what ends up happening though is that we go in making offers that will go get a second lien on the property, basically keep the first one in place at doing this wrap and in order to have the lower interest rate for a buyer. Now, I don't know if it'll happen or not, but depending on what rates do, could happen.
And you're saying, so like I'm a seller, I have a 2% interest rate and I do a buyer, I wanna buy the house and they go, hey, your interest rate's great. I want you to be like a seller financing, but I just wanna pay down your loan, so. But we don't, we said we don't wanna go to the bank or anything, so I would just pay, we'd have some kind of contract between you and me stating, I'm gonna pay you.
Correct.
And you're just gonna pay the mortgage.
Correct.
Thing.
Yeah, so, but typically then, but there's gonna be equity in the property. So you're gonna have to go get a loan that would cover the equity that they have, or have enough cash to give it to them. Does that make sense?
That still show up. in there.
Which,
Like if me and Dave should go to sell ours.
Yeah.
And we do a seller finance, can that clear that loan?
no,
That loan would stay.
It's
on
still- yeah.
my name.
it's still in your name. Yep. And so that's why this due on sale though, because if you went and did that,
Right.
but then your bank found out, like, and again, if interest rates are at 5 and yours at 2.6, they found out you did it, it's possible that they come to you and say, you got to pay off that loan or we're going to foreclose. In which case, if he doesn't, it gets foreclosed, the buyer's now totally hosed. So his credits hosed, screwed. whatever.
Yeah, but I made a lot of
But
money. And I'm in
The
another
other, but the buyer now potentially though is gonna lose the property because
Interesting.
of that due on sale clause. So that's why I'm saying in a traditional transaction, this really doesn't matter. But if you start doing any type of crazy financing, you make sure to explain to your buyer, let me explain how this all works.
But why would the bank come back? Just because?
Well, because they would potentially, I'm not sure, at the end of the
As
day,
long as everything's above, like, if they're
Well-
taking care of the property, then it shouldn't necessarily.
yeah, typically, banks don't want properties. They don't want properties, they want their money. So most of the time, and I'm saying it most of the time, just because it's not always gonna be, most of the time, as long as you're making your payment, they're never gonna do anything about it. So as long as the seller is making the payment, they're never gonna care. But they could, I mean, if you had done a wrap like that, they could come back and say, yeah, no, we're not, we're enacting the due on sale, you gotta pay it off right now. So. All right, section 14 says this is the entire agreement. And let me make sure you guys understand this. The entire agreement includes the buyer broker, the due diligence checklist, and I thought it had, yeah, I thought it included, maybe it's, I need to update mine. I thought it
This one
included
has
set the
section
wire,
15.
Wire fraud.
wire fraud. Does it have wire fraud?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah,
You at least have
okay.
Section 15.
What? Oh, yeah, I at least have section
Oh.
15. This, yeah, this is too old. I need to update it. All right, next time. All right, so the entire agreement then, not looking at this one, looking at the one I gave you, is the buyer broker, the due diligence, and the wire fraud alert disclosure, and then any addendums, okay? So that's the entire agreement. So really, even if all you're doing is getting this signed and you haven't gotten the wire fraud alert and the due diligence, technically you don't have the whole contract.
Is it still enforceable though?
I think you could run into, if somebody wanted an out of this, so if you come across a buyer, who has somebody who has signed this, you could ask if it says that, and if they don't, then did,
But it would only work if you're taking another Everest agent. Hypothetically,
well, yeah, it depends on what.
assuming everyone else has their sticker out.
I'm pretty sure, I haven't looked recently at what the one on the MLS says, because most brokerages use the one that's on the MLS or the same version of that. So I'll have to look and see if it contains the wire fraud. I don't remember. All right, section 15 says that the effective date is entered into and effective the date that the buyer has signed the exclusive buyer broker and the authorized agent has received a mutually signed copy of the buyer broker. Okay, so then everybody's gonna sign. Now, before you turn the page though, notice in red, it says, do you have a real estate need, property to sell or purchase outside of the market area? The idea of why we put that there is for you to remember to ask, because agents leave money on the table all the time by not asking, do you have another house you need to sell, or with you're selling this one, to buy somewhere else, make sure you ask, because it's a great way for you to send a referral and get paid a commission for just sending a referral. So it's a good question.
Somebody pick a different agent.
Yeah, well, that happens too. But- Oh, I know. But at least you can try. All right, next, buyer due diligence. So here's how I look at this form. In my eyes, the buyer due diligence form is your get out of jail free. Now, I don't know if Jason said this to you guys for on the seller's disclosures. I always tell a seller that the seller disclosures is their get out of jail free card. So for you guys, make sure you're explaining, like I had mentioned to you, you want to tell the buyers, basically what this due diligence checklist is saying is that the buyer is being advised that the company and its agents are trained in the marketing of real estate. Neither the company nor its agents are trained or licensed to provide buyers with professional advice regarding the physical condition, blah, yada, yada, yada. Basically, everything that is on this form that is in bold are just examples. So this is what I always tell the buyer. This is to give you an idea of some of the things you may want to check out before you buy the house. So this is how this, in the event a buyer tries to sue you saying you said that the property line was in one spot and it really was somewhere else, this is what we would use as a company to go back and say, no, we had you sign this that says that if you are, buyer's advised that without an accurate survey of the property, the buyer cannot be certain as to the boundary line. So all of this that's why this is your get out of jail free. So make sure you always use this form, okay? All right, so get them to sign this. So you go through and have them initial each of the pages and you're gonna have them sign. Okay? Then the next form is the receipt and acknowledgement of buyer due diligence. So this one is just an extra layer of protection for you. The idea of this one is too many times, well, you guys tell me, in the event that you had a buyer sign the buyer due diligence, they go buy the property, and then let's stick with this whole survey thing. They find out the neighbor comes over and says, hey, your fence is on my property, you need to move it. They go find out, yep, it really is. The buyer comes back and says, James, you told me that the property line was where the fence was, so we're suing you. What do you think they're gonna say in court about the due diligence form though? Because let's assume you had them sign everything through dot loop. So you send it to them through dot loop. Do people actually read?
No. that's what I was gonna mention.
Sometimes, unless they're lawyers.
So what are they gonna say? Yeah, unless they're an attorney.
They didn't
Or-
explain it to me, I just signed.
Yeah, so what they're gonna say is, yeah, he didn't tell me that. I just went through and signed it. That's what I had to do to get the house. So the idea of this Century 21 receipt and acknowledgement is an extra layer of protection, because here's the thing. What are the chances that somebody actually really reads through this? Almost zero, right?
Low, yeah.
And especially, let's just use the home inspection piece of it here. Where's it at? Physical condition. So under this physical condition, nobody's gonna stop and read that. But the way we've designed this form, and this one is just Century 21. Like, we're gonna have them then initial right here about home inspection. And it's less likely for somebody to get away with saying, well, hey, they didn't explain it to me. Like, to me, they initial here in about the time it takes you to initial it, you could read, I hereby understand and acknowledge my right for a home inspection performed by a professional home inspector named Joaquin, right?
That's right.
I'm just kidding. The best.
The best.
So same thing with home warranty. I didn't know I could get a home warranty. Well, you initialed right there. And like, to me, you're less likely to get away with, well, I didn't read it, when it's like one sentence and you had to initial right next to it, kind of. So this is just that extra layer of protection for you on all this. The other thing that's key on this is, remember, back on the buyer broker, it said the buyer broker, along with due diligence and the wire fraud alert, constitute the whole thing. So we really should have them be signing that at the same time. Well, what if they don't buy a house for a month or 2 months? Well, so the idea then on this is we're gonna have them sign this one before writing the offer, because notice it has a spot for property address. So it's got a spot where we can put in the property address and MLS. So my recommendation is get them to sign the buyer due diligence right away. Then before you write the offer, have them do this one. Because now you've got that extra layer of, I had 2 different times that I have proof that I told you you should get a home inspection or the home warranty.
So would you sign that every time you put in an offer, like, in-
I would say you should, for every offer you do,
Okay.
include this for them, because then you're even more protected.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if you had done 3 or 4 offers for them, they tried to come back and sue us, if we could show up and go, all right, well, they signed this 4 times, like. I think a judge would be like, okay, yeah, they tried to tell you. All right, next, confirmation of earnest money receipt. So on this is gonna be filled out, you'll put in the buyer's name, your name, the brokerage, the seller's name, the seller's agent, the brokerage, the property address. And the idea of this is just, once we receive the earnest money, we want proof that we've gotten it. So this one is not signed by your client. Whoever receives the earnest money is gonna fill this out and just put in. And remember from the Rep C, we talked about offer reference date. Here it is asking for the offer reference date between the buyer and the seller, and confirms that on such and such date that we received the money, how we got it. And then whoever receives it signs this document.
And this, if you use Earnest, is this like, they just email you that, right? Like their confirmation of earnest money, is that the same thing or those different things?
Well, when you say they, who's they?
Because normally like you use Earnest, once it goes through, like you get your like receipt and. But then, like I said, it's all up to the like Brianna at that point, so like.
Yeah.
All you have to worry about is just that one picture, right?
Yeah, that's fine. Or you could even just check the box here, fill out the other box, put earnest on the line and sign it too. Either way, yep. All right, next, limited agency consent. Now, I already gave you the answer, but when do we use this?
When you were representing
Perfect. So either if it's the same brokerage, so if it's Century 21 Everest, what if it was Century 21 Harmon?
No.
Okay, good. So just because it's Century 21 doesn't mean if it's Century 21 Everest, we use it. So, or if you're representing both sides, then you're gonna use it as well, okay?
Century 21 Everest Center, you would need this. though.
You still need it, yep, because it's still Century 21 Everest.
And Orem and like a whole.
And
3
St.
others,
George,
yeah.
or, yep. any of them. So, okay, you're gonna put in the buyer's name, seller's name, agent representing each, the brokerage. And you'll notice it has 2 spots for agents, but only 1 for brokerage, because again, the brokerage it's based on that. The address, explain to them the disadvantages of that, and then section 9, you're gonna either check that it's 1 agent, in which case it's your listing and you've got the buyer, or 2, or B, that there's 2 agents, who the seller's agent is, who the buyer's agent is. In that situation, if it was 2 different agents within our brokerage, you still owe them all the same fiduciary duties. The seller's agent owes them all the same fiduciary duties. It's the brokerage that's limited, okay? And then buyers sign, sellers sign, and only 1 agent has to sign. So even though there may be 2 agents involved, as long as whoever's filling this out, which typically should be the buyer's agent, you sign it here, that's good enough. You're signing on behalf of the company, so the other agent doesn't need to. All right, wire fraud. So this one, we're gonna have them, and remember, this is part of the buyer broker. We're gonna have them, you're gonna put your name in here to whoever the buyer is. And then just explain to them, especially with a buyer, like you almost can't be too overdo it enough to say, like, do not send a wire without getting in the car and driving to the title company and asking the person, did you actually ask me to why, and you don't have to be that extreme, but be very, very careful. Make sure you're telling your clients, the wire instructions are probably not going to change. So if you get any notice that they've changed, call me and let's verify before you do anything. Because once that money's gone, it's gone. Okay? All right. So they're gonna sign here that you explained that to them. The affiliated business arrangement disclosure. So the idea of this, so Everest has sister companies with North Star and Inspiro. We would love for your clients to use North Star and Inspiro. They're not always going to. And so this form is basically telling them, disclosing, RESPA requires that you disclose if you're going to have any type of financial gain. So this form is disclosing, and notice that it's in bold here.
You are not required to use the listed providers as a condition of settlement on your loan or purchase. There are frequently other settlement service providers available with similar services. You're free to shop around. So we're basically disclosing to them everything they need to know, that they don't have to use Inspiro or Financial or North Star, but we would like them to. So do you need this form if they're not using either of those companies?
I think the correct answer is yes, but I'm not good at getting this done.
The correct answer is yes. The correct answer is yes, you still need this done. And part of the idea behind that is, even though they're not used, so if they didn't use them, I guess technically you could argue that, well, we didn't need to because it didn't matter. But the reason we want to still get it is because if last minute Inspiro were to step in and save a loan or something somehow, then, you know, we need to disclose that. So, and again, if they're not, it shouldn't be a big deal to say, this doesn't really matter because you're not using them, just sign it that you know. All right. Lead-based paint disclosure. When do we need this?
78 was right.
So if the home was built in 1978, do I need it?
Yes.
No, it's prior to 1978. So if it was built in 78, we don't need it. If it's 78 or newer, would it hurt to have it? No. But required if it was built prior to 1978. So if it's 77 or before, and thankfully the MLS now has created, if you list a property that's that age, you have to upload the lead-based paint disclosure. So like you to some extent will kind of know, because it'll have an attachment on the MLS. But you're just going to fill out the address of the property. Now we're doing the buyer side we're talking about right now. So the seller should have already filled this out and disclosed that they either know of lead-based paint or they have no knowledge of lead-based paint, and that they've given you those records or they have none to give you. So then the buyer is going to initial that they've received copies of any of the information in 2A or B, that they've received the pamphlet, Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. So make sure you're sharing that with them on .loop, because they're going to initial that you've given it to them. They're going to initial that they've read the lead warning in section 1 up here. And then they're going to initial either this one or this one. So they're either initialing that they're going to take a 10-day opportunity. And if they do initial this one, you also need to include the lead-based paint addendum. So just keep in mind, the addendum is only required if if your buyer initials in this box. If they don't initial in the box, you don't need the addendum. You always need the disclosure if it's prior to 78. You only need the addendum if they've initialed there. Yeah.
What if you just made your due diligence for 10 days?
What do you mean?
Like your buyer due diligence, because like you have a 10-day opportunity to
Oh,
conduct a risk-free, but also in your due diligence, it's you have the right to do any tests you would like, so.
Yeah.
You just-
so yeah, you would be fine with that. Okay. But if you initial here, you have to use the lead-based paint addendum.
And I guess that's more for like negotiations, they like submit an offer and they go, oh man, 10 days to do due diligence, why 10 days? Something like, oh, you know, for the lead-based paint, it'll take like 10 days.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. All right, so if they initial here, then they're waiving their right to do a test. And then the listing agent needs to initial section 4 as well, that they've informed the seller, and then everybody signs. Both agents, buyer and seller. All right, last one. Last page of this is the best one to fill out, because this is how you get paid. So let me just preface it with, if you use a transaction coordinator, you don't have to fill this out. If you don't use a transaction coordinator, you're going to fill it out. So on this one is a spreadsheet. So on .loop, to upload something to .loop can only be a PDF. It can't be an Excel or a Word document. So once you fill this out, you'll fill this out in Excel, and then you'll need to print it out as a PDF to upload into .loop. Okay. All right, so you're going to put in the address of the property, the name of the buyer, name of the seller, the name of the title company, and then on the Excel spreadsheet, this section is a dropdown that you can click on. So the default is that it's just residential, but if it was commercial or something else, you're going to click on it and choose from the dropdown. Okay. Next, you're gonna put in this selling price of the property. This one is a drop down as well, and you're gonna have to choose from either net, gross, or flat. The default is gross. And do I need to explain difference between gross and net, or does anybody not know what it means? That you want me to explain it, or does everybody know?
For an understanding of it.
You want me to?
Yeah.
Okay, so what, on the MLS, a lot of times you'll just see, it'll either say gross or net by the BAC. If it says net, which really doesn't matter too much in our current market right now, like there's not gonna be really a difference between gross or net, but the majority of my career, there's been a difference. So net, what it would be is if I wrote an offer and I said, we're gonna give you $300,000 for the property, but we want you to pay $10,000 in closing costs. If we did gross, the commission would be based on the 300,000. If we did net, it would be based on 290. The commission's based on 290 versus 300. Does that make sense? So that's the difference of gross net, and then the other option would be flat amount, which is just if you were charging a flat fee for something. All right, so you're gonna choose from whatever the MLS says as gross or net, okay? And then the commission that's being offered, so whatever the BAC is that's being collected is gonna be there. Commission to an outside referral company, so if you were paying a referral to somebody outside of our company, you would click on this and say yes, and then it'll open up another window over here that you'd fill out who that's being paid to. Commission advance company used, if you had gotten an advance on the commission, which I always hate training this because I don't want people going, oh, you could do that. Yes, you can do that, but it's like going to get a title loan or something like it's, payday loan. It's an exorbitant commission interest rate.
Yeah.
So anyway, you just leave it at no. The admin fee collected. So now remember on ours, we showed $495 on this. So if I collected $495, I'm gonna put $495 in there. So whatever the admin fee, what was collected goes in there. How much of the earnest money was held at Century 21? So if we're holding the earnest money, you're gonna put the amount in here. If it's held at the title company or a different brokerage, just leave it as 0. Agents credits given at title. Occasionally, there's times where at title, something goes screwy and maybe you say, well, I'll kick in $200 of my commission. If you did that, you would put that amount in here. So just don't do it, and then you don't have to worry about it. Okay? All right, that will then calculate for us what the title check should be. So what the check we should get from the title company should match whatever this amount is. Okay. Then down here, you're gonna fill this out is how to split the commission. If it's a single agent, if you're not on a team, you'll just leave this as single agent and fill out the rest of the form. If you're on a team, you're gonna click on this and select team. It'll open up another box over here to where you can put who the team leader is for who the commission's going to. So then your name will go here. If you're on a team, the team leader's name will go over there. This Excel spreadsheet is then going to deduct the $295, because remember we talked about the first $295 of that admin fee that's collected goes to the company. So that gets deducted right there, which then says, okay, now your commission is going to be based off of this amount. So from there, you're going to put in what your split is. So if you were on a 70-30, you're going to put 30%. So you're always going to put the amount that goes to Everest in here. So if you're on a 86-14, you're gonna put 14 in here. If you're on a 50-50, then I guess it doesn't matter, 50, but 60-40, you're gonna put 40 in. Okay? And then the system's then gonna calculate that franchise fee. Remember I told you every single transaction we have to pay this to Century 21. So it calculates that and deducts it from the commission. If there's an admin fee being paid by you. So what that would mean is up here, I didn't collect an admin fee. So I should have, but I didn't. So I would have put 0 in here. It therefore would have shown $295 down here, because that would mean you're paying it for the buyer. Okay. And then here you're going to put in how much money you want to donate to the foundation. It typically defaults it to $21, but you can change it to whatever you want, including 0 if you don't want to do it.
Can you explain what that is really?
The foundation?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically the idea of it is Century 21 has set up a separate company that is a nonprofit organization. And the idea is a way for us to show we're giving back to the community. So we've set up the Century 21 Foundation, and then this money would go to that foundation, and then every year, like we do a golf tournament every year, all the money that's raised from that goes to the foundation. And then the foundation, there are people that are on the committee. So if you want to be involved in it, you can get involved in the committee to where you would go, I think they meet once a month and they just talk about what are we going to do with this money? Who should we give it to? And so like we had one year, one of our agents' houses burned down. And so they took money from the foundation and gave that to our agent to help, go buy some new clothes and stuff like that. So just things like that. And typically, I'm trying to remember one of the ones we used to do Ronald McDonald House. I don't know if we still do or not. But so, yeah, that money then is just used to give away to.
Is that what turkey thing that they did this year?
Thanksgiving here.
The Thanksgiving year, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So this year yep. So,
That's pretty cool, actually. I didn't know that.
yeah. So that's what this, and you can donate whatever amount you want to that. And then transaction coordinator fee. So remember I said in the beginning, if you're using a transaction coordinator, you're not going to fill this out. So if you're filling this form out and the name of whoever the transaction coordinator goes in here. But if you're using a transaction coordinator and you're filling this out, you shouldn't be. Like, you just kind of wasted your money to some extent. Like, they should be filling it out for you. So they will be filling that out, put their name in there. Then this is going to show what your commission check amount you're going to get. And then do you want it to be direct deposit? Yes or no? If yes, then it'll get direct deposited. If no, then you'll get a check. But the recommendation is I would recommend do direct deposit because then it just goes into your account. And if you don't, you'll get a check, but it's going to usually take longer to get in the check.
Now, because they mail.
Yeah, because they mail it. Since COVID, they now mail it to you versus prior to COVID, you would get it here at the office. But our accounting people are still not working at the office. So. All right, that's it. Questions? Okay, so let me give you a couple of things that for next class.
I don't know what classes are there, just to be.
What's that?
I think this is the last one.
No, there's one more.
So
Tuesday.
2 more. So there's,
One more.
oh, one more. Oh,
One more class. So yeah, so that's what I want to talk about. Specifically for you guys that are on Zoom specifically, and I know a few of you, this isn't going to make sense, but if at all possible, so I'm saying for you guys that are here in person, but also mostly for you guys that are on Zoom, if at all possible, be here in person on Tuesday. Because Tuesday's class is the laws class, which sounds boring, and maybe it is still, but we're actually going to play a game. I've turned it into a game, and it doesn't work as well if you're on Zoom. So for you guys that are on Zoom, if you can arrange to be here, please do. I'll still let you be on Zoom, but it'll be a lot more fun if you're here in person on Tuesday.
It's competitive. Oh, yeah.
It gets competitive. So anyway, that's the plan for Tuesday. We'll start at 10 o'clock. So if you guys that are on Zoom can be here. So for you guys on Zoom, if you have not put your name and license number at least once in the chat box, well, for sure, put your name in the chat box no matter what, because that's my record of who attended class. But if you've not ever put your license in there, make sure you do. But anyway, so sweet. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
See you guys on Tuesday. You're welcome.
Hey, Russ,
Yeah.
I don't think I put my name in the chat box on last class, when was that? On Monday or Tuesday?
Tuesday?
Oh, yeah, that's why.
On Tuesday?
Tuesday,
Okay.
but I just wanted you to know that I was there. You can look at the recording if you'd like.
So yeah, I'll check it and make sure that.
Thanks, Russ.
Fair enough. So, yep, you're welcome. So, yeah, I know you can't be here unless you want to come to Salt Lake.
It'd be a long motorcycle ride.
Yeah, well, I'm doing it twice. And I'm jumping in the car today to drive down there. So,
Oh, that's right. We're gonna see you down here today.
no, you won't see me till next week, but.
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha.
If you come down there, I'll come home Monday and then fly back down on Wednesday. So,
Nice. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you, Russ.
cool, sounds good, thanks.
We'll see ya.
I'll try to be here Tuesday.
Okay, yeah, if you can, great. If not,
Like I said, not to beat a dead horse, but